Hi, my name is Dan Gomez, and this is Mental Health Super Omnia. Mental health above all. We identify and understand mental health issues and the paths for help. Today, we want to talk about reality TV, particularly as it relates to positive and negative impacts on our lives. We have two guests with us today. First is Danielle Lindemann. Danielle is a professor of sociology at Lehigh University and is Stanley Kelley Jr. visiting professor of distinguished teaching in gender and sexuality studies at Princeton. Dr. Lindemann is the author of True Story, What Reality TV Says About Us, as well as several other books. Normally, I would like to show you the book, but I use a Kindle, so just trust me, it's in here. Next, we have Erika Kawamura. Erika has a doctorate in psychology, PsyD, board certified in lifestyle medicine, brings over 20 years experience and is part of the Equilibria psychological and consultation services leadership team. She provides therapy to adult clients to help them improve their well-being, lead more fulfilling lives, and work toward their personal goals. Danielle, we read your book, True Story, What Reality TV Says About Us, and I found it fascinating. So in preparation for today, I have been binging on selected episodes of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, cooking shows and competition, Naked and Afraid, just to name a few. Okay, very, very, very interesting.
Quite the
Can you
variety.
briefly frame up, exactly, can you briefly frame up for us what some of the biggest takeaways from your book are?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway is that people think about reality TV as being this kind of space that exists apart from us, being like these zany people participating in these outrageous activities. But actually, by looking at reality television, we can kind of learn more about our own lives. I call it a funhouse mirror of society because reality TV is kind of like our everyday lives, but just amplified, dialed up to 11. So that's kind of the overall takeaway of the book.
Yeah, and what did you find to be the most surprising?
Yeah, so one of the things I always say is I looked at a lot of research about reality TV, psychological research, which I'm sure we'll get into, um, and sort of the types of people who tune into reality TV.
Mhm,
And one of the things I found was that
mhm.
people who watch reality TV are different from people who don't watch reality TV in some fundamental respects. And one of them was that people who watch a lot of reality TV are more likely to go hot tubbing on dates. Now, like
Oh,
correlation is not causation, right? We don't know if reality TV makes people hot tub or just hot tubbers are more likely to watch reality TV. But I thought that was like just a really interesting distinction between, I mean, a lot of people watch reality TV. A majority of people watch reality TV, but like heavy watchers of reality TV are more likely to go hot tubbing on
and
dates,
that's a
apparently.
very specific activity. Like I was
Very
thinking
specific.
something more of like, oh, they're more likely to party, go out drinking,
They are more likely
or
to
more
drink,
hook up
right?
and,
Yeah,
like,
there's a lot. I mean, there's more likely to
yeah,
drink, more likely to use social media, like
right,
more likely to
right,
be
right,
women. Like there are other ones too, but that was the one that I found most interesting because you're right, it's so oddly specific. But if you
right,
think about reality TV, there are a lot of shows where they go hot tubbing. So maybe it
right,
just,
yeah, right.
encourages them
But
to
it's
want
not
to
like
do that.
everybody has a hot tub in their backyard. I mean, it's great
Right.
if you
Where are they
do, but
finding these
you
hot
have to,
tubs? I don't
right.
know.
Right. So do you feel like that also like distorts people's expectations like with dating or what relationships should look like and things like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So there are studies that show that there was one study that looked at men in college and they found that they use dating shows to kind of teach them about dating or teach them about what, women might want in a date, which can be perilous, right? Because those dating shows are very skewed versions of reality. Um, Also, people who watch reality TV are more likely to feel like interactions have conflict involved in them, especially romantic relationships have conflict involved in them, right? If you're constantly watching scenes
Mhm.
of everyday conflict between real people, right? This is not script. This isn't, well, it is scripted in some ways, right? But
Mhm.
ostensibly, it's unscripted TV. If you're constantly watching people getting into conflicts, you're more likely to feel like your everyday experiences are involving conflict, even if they might not be.
Right. And then like there's something like you were saying that voyeuristic and also just like we're projecting our own stuff onto these characters or if you can like over identify with them. And so it's like, all that emotions are also evoked, right? So then it's like then you're carrying that into your personal life and maybe, your spouse or partner does something and or your friend and you just wanted to create your own drama and things. But
Create your, yeah, I mean, so it is
yeah.
voyeuristic, right? I think we've talked before about how we create these parasocial relationships with the people on these
Mhm.
shows, right? Which means we kind of feel like we have a relationship with them,
Right.
even if we don't, right? And we do that with scripted TV too, right? Like we feel like we have a relationship with Carrie Bradshaw because we followed her for so many seasons. But it's heightened here because these are ostensibly real people performing as themselves. And then we can go, off the shows and go onto social media and connect with them that way and buy their products. And there are all these different points of connection. So you get to the point where you almost feel like you have that closeness with that person.
Yeah, and I think that, that exaggeration and I love how you use the word like funhouse or the caricatures, because there is like that blurring of the lines between reality and scripted, because, these people kind of have to live with the consequences of their actions and their lives. They've led to divorce and mental health issues and suicide, that it's scripted. They've got earpieces in their ears, like, producers telling them what to say and what to do and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it is script. I mean, I think at this point, right, we all know that it's not totally unscripted. I think people think it's more scripted than it actually is, though. I mean, the
Oh,
earpieces,
okay.
yes, or they'll have them, say, refilm a scene that they've already done, or they'll talk about, what they want their narrative arc to be for that season. But within that arc, their interactions are real. They're not really telling them what to say most of the time. There are shows where they do have the earpiece, right? Like America's Next Top Model, where they're telling Tyra Banks what to say to the contestants.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting. But so I guess, like, do you think it normalizes those like quote unquote bad behaviors, like the conflict, the fighting, the drama, the cat fights, maybe, or even yeah, all those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes and no, right? I think sure, right? Because studies have shown that we do internalize that, and then we're more likely to feel like we have those conflicts in our everyday lives too. And I've experienced that too, right? Like I remember once I was heavily watching the show The Traitors, and I don't know if you know that show, but they sit around this table and there's like a lot of conflict because it's this game and they're trying to root out who the traitors are. And then I would sit in faculty meetings, and I'd be like, okay, like we're at a tribal council now, or like who are the traitors? And I had to remind myself, okay, like this is not I become so immersed in this, right? And as someone who studies it, I'm hyper aware of that effect. So I would think the average person, yes, like the way that they interact with the world. And there's a lot of media research showing that the way that we interact with the world is swayed by the media that we consume, for sure. But I also think there's a large contingent of people who are kind of hate watching the shows, right? They're watching them
Mhm.
because they know that it's bad behavior, and this reaffirms that we decided it's bad behavior within our culture, and that reaffirms for them like those people are doing bad things and I would never be like those people, right? That train wreck that we talked
Yes,
about,
yeah, yeah.
right? Like I watch the train wreck to show myself that I'm not part of the train wreck, right?
Right,
Like I don't do those things, and to symbolically distance myself. So
right.
yeah,
Or to
I
kind
think
of like
yes
make
and
fun of,
no.
in a way of like, it's
To make fun of.
entertainment, right? Kind of like, oh my God, I would never do something like that. And
Right. And to look
yeah.
down on the people who are engaging
Mhm.
in those behaviors. So yes, I think it influences us for sure. I think it can influence us positively too. There's also research that shows that it influences us positively as well.
Mhm.
But there's certainly research that shows that it can influence us negatively.
Right. Yeah,
Can you
because you're
give us an
talking about that.
example of,
Oh, go ahead.
can you give us an example of the
Yeah.
positive?
So there was a study. It's really hard to kind of determine causation with these types of
Mhm.
studies, right? Even talking about the hot tubbing, right? Like, is it causing people to jump into hot tubs? Who knows? But there was a study that determined in the American Economic Review that determined this causal link between the show 16 and Pregnant and reduced teen pregnancy rates. So people were
Oh.
watching. It's interesting because critics of that show would say it glamorizes teen pregnancy. But if you ever watch that show does not glamorize teen pregnancy. Everyone on that show is miserable, right? And so, right, you have this effect of girls watching that show and saying, "Ooh, like this is not for me." Right?
Mhm.
So it actually can have a positive impact because it holds like immense power. It's this cultural juggernaut. So many people are tuning in. So it has this immense power, whether for good or for evil, I guess, or bad.
So if you take that show, um, 16 and Pregnant, I think is what you said it was, and you put it side by side with Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, right? Where they've maybe done some things that have skirted some of their religious rules. They would say that they haven't, but clearly they're pushing the envelope a little bit. They've engaged in some sexual activity that's clearly pushed, that one would argue has pushed the envelope. If 16 and pregnant helped reduce teen births by teens, would another show like Secret Lives of Mormon Wives encourage other behavior that pushing the sexual boundaries when you're married and younger?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I'm not aware of any research on it's a relatively new show, right? They're only on I think they're heading into the third season now. So I'm not aware of any research on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, but I mean, it's certainly possible that people could watch reality TV shows and, it would influence their sexual behavior.
Right. And like shows like that always like fascinate me, right? Of like how I don't want to say like are they allowed to be on the show? Because obviously you are, but
You mean the Mormons?
the types of people that choose to go on the
Oh, you're
shows
frozen.
and they're and, and
Oh, wait, Erika, you're frozen.
Totally frozen.
Okay, it's not just my end.
I don't
No,
know why.
totally. There you go. You're back.
Oh, okay. I don't know why
There
it
you are.
can happen. I
Okay.
have like full bars. Sorry. No, like shows like that always like fascinate me in terms of like the people that choose to go on them because, it's not like you're, 20 something party dating, all of that stuff, but these are people of the communities that are very like strict. They have religious expectations or lifestyle behaviors that they have to ascribe to, whether it's like a religious thing or the people that are out in, rural parts and, they have limited use of the internet or they have strict parents and things like that. They've got the 10 kids, right? And like, and then you kind of see the transformation of like, they become less so of, they kind of like rebel against like that strict guidelines, so to speak.
Yeah, that is interesting, right? But I mean, the people on Mormon Wives were already influencers, right? They were like mom
Right.
talk
Hmm.
influencers. So in some ways, this is just kind of more of the same for them.
Right. Or like their way. It's almost like using that as an excuse to do whatever they want, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in like gatekeeping who is or is not Mormon, but I mean, there's been
Right.
a lot of critique from Mormon groups that say like these people are not actually like living in accordance with the tenets of the Mormon faith. So, I mean, that
Yeah.
was one interesting thing to me about the show is I thought there'd be kind of more tension around their
Yeah.
Mormon faith, right?
Hmm.
And it's there, it's in the background, but it's not really like they're not having a lot of crises of faith that I've seen on the show. So that's kind of interesting.
Hmm.
But I also think it depends like how people are consuming these shows, like what we were talking about, right? Like, yes, people might consume Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and say, that looks great. Like, I want to be like that for sure. I'm sure that there are people doing that. But there's also a whole contingent of people who are consuming those shows to mock the women that are on the
Right.
shows, right?
Right. Like that,
Well,
making yourself feel better than type
Right.
of thing. It's pure entertainment.
but what about shows like the other shows that I binged, like Naked and Afraid or the Survivor type of shows? I mean, clearly, there's a voyeuristic element to it. I mean, you have a title, Naked and Afraid. Trust me, it's going to be voyeuristic, right? But
Hmm.
like, why are shows like that so addicting? I mean, that year after year they continue to get um, uh, refunded. They're in season, I don't know, 92 or something at this point in time. Like, why, why? And is that positive or negative for us?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons that we're in season 1 million of Naked and Afraid, right, is because these shows are really cheap to produce. So you don't actually need that much of a viewership in order to like keep it getting it renewed. I mean, that's one of the reasons why there is so much reality TV is because it's really cheap to produce versus scripted shows. And there's basically a guaranteed audience there. So that's one of the reasons. But I think you're right. There is that voyeurism element with shows like Naked and Afraid, even the title, right? People are going to tune in to see what it's like. Naked and Afraid also, I think, is one of those teaching shows, right? Where it kind of teaches you more about, how to survive in rugged terrain. And that's one of the interesting things about reality TV too, is that oftentimes it takes you into these realms of social life that you don't often get to see or
Mhm.
experience, that you don't see highlighted in scripted shows, for better or for worse. Right. And so I say I've learned a lot from reality TV, right? I know nothing about survivalism. I would never want to be on that show, even if it were clothed. Like, you could not pay me enough to be in a jungle, right? But at the same time, I've learned about survivalism from that show. So I think people are tuning in. There's this kind of hierarchy when it comes to reality TV, where there's shows that people see as kind of really trashy, and then there's shows that people see as more wholesome. It's interesting with Naked and Afraid because it sounds like it's going to be one of those trashy shows, but actually, you know, other than the fact that they're naked, like it's really not that like subversive and trashy, right? They're just like surviving in the jungle for a number of days, right? So yeah, there's so many reasons that people tune in, like all the reasons we mentioned. And also people tune in to learn. And I would say that that's one of the aspects of Naked and Afraid, though certainly not the only aspect.
You know what's interesting? My wife and I went on a vacation to Alaska recently. And as we were uh, taking this one tour, they were explaining to us that in the local high school, you know how in our area you might have a unit on volleyball or a unit on baseball or something like that. They literally had a unit on survival because many of the kids would go on into the fishing industry, and if they got washed off and made it to shore, they wanted to make sure that they could live for a couple of days. So they literally, as part of a unit, a teaching unit, would put them on a deserted island, which there's a billion of them in Alaska, for like a weekend to make sure that they could survive. Okay, and they'd teach them how to do that. So there actually is a reality, a real element to that, right? I mean, that in and of itself could be a show, but I agree with you. When you think about Naked and Afraid, you're you're learning about different elements. You're learning how they're surviving for 21 days or whatever. And it turns out that we actually do that. I mean, people in Wyoming learn how to make snow caves. I mean, like, what the heck? I've never had to make a snow cave in Philadelphia.
But I agree that could be its own reality show. There are a bunch of reality shows based in Alaska. A lot of what I know about Alaska is based on reality TV.
Like such as what?
Well, there's like the Long Road Alaska Truckers. There are shows that are kind of they filmed in remote areas of Alaska that are really hard. I wonder how
Mm.
production even works, but really hard to get to, and so, the people are really almost like living these subsistence existences, right? I mean, one could argue that these shows are very exploitative in a lot of ways, right? Like, are the people on these shows being exploited or not is another question. But it does give you this portal or this window into these areas of social life that you wouldn't otherwise get to see.
Mhm.
So has reality TV affected the way we deal with each other, or the way politics works, or just our normal social interactions if we go to a party, or has that changed, the way we interact with each other changed as a result of reality TV?
Um, I mean, there's studies that show that, again, it's hard to like demonstrate causation, right? But yeah, right. Like, I mean, there's tons of media research that shows that the media we consume impacts how we interact with each other. Reality TV, a majority of people are watching reality TV. It's this cultural juggernaut. Of course, it's going to impact the way that we think about the world, our attitudes, our values. I don't know if you want me to get into politics, but yes, like literally have a reality star in the White House for the second time, right? Like, it is infiltrated politics as well. Um, so I think that's, one of the things I say is like I'm an evangelist for reality TV, not in the sense that I think everyone needs to like it. I think there's good reasons not to like it, but I really think it's important to pay attention to it and how it is impacting us on a broad scale, because people tend to think of it as just like, oh, the Kardashians, that's just like this frivolous thing over here. But when this many people are tuning in, it's really, really impacting the way that we understand the world and behave in the world.
But isn't it true that if you become a reality TV star, you end up you have the potential to have significantly more mental health issues?
I don't know. I'm not aware of a study that shows that. Again, I would wonder if that's true. I would wonder about correlation versus causation, right? Like, do people with mental health issues, are they more likely to go on the shows? I don't know.
Right. And I know
Or I
they
can
can't pick.
imagine, right? There are people who have said that they have like diagnosed PTSD from being on reality shows, which, I'm not a clinician, you are, right? Like, but I believe that that's true just as a layperson, right? The environments that these people are being, not for every show, right? But like a lot of these shows, like The Bachelor, it's like you're in this environment, you're closed off from the world, you can't even read a book. All you have is alcohol and like a little bit of food, and you're like forced to talk about this guy 24/7. I can't even imagine. I can't speak to that, right? But I can't even imagine the emotional toll that that would take. And I'm sure there are people who've been on that show who are dealing with mental repercussions years
Right.
later.
And they've
I think there
shared,
should be
and some
more
of them
research on this.
shared, yeah, I think a couple of, or at least one, I think I heard like even, committed suicide just from being on the show and stuff. And again, it's kind of like that, question of like, which came first, the chicken or the egg, and also the correlation causation type of thing where, I know these candidates have to go through like psychological evaluations, and I don't know what they look for. I know they probably look for like, they don't want somebody who's gonna like, be very harmful, physical harm or anything like that, or have a breakdown or something, but just like a little bit of that entertainment, right? Maybe like little bit of the, you know, um, like drama person, right? Like these are characteristics that they're looking for. But afterwards, like, I'd mentioned earlier about they have to live with the consequences of their behavior and however it impacts their lives. And I know there's like a lot of that, hate, like the bullying on social media that happens afterwards. And, like you were saying, like, it's one thing to maybe like, hate a TV character, right? And oh my God, like the villain of the show or the movie, but that's not the actor or actress, right? And so it's just, you just hate the character and be done with. But then these are like real people, where it's still them, right? Even though they're like amplified, exaggerated drama versions, it's still them. And then now they're getting all these like hate messages and bullying, and maybe they did get, if they did have some trauma before, maybe it got reactivated and triggered, right? And then something happened. But yeah, it is
Right.
interesting.
I
Yeah.
mean, my understanding of the psychological testing, like you say, is like on one level, they're trying to weed out the people who are going to be violent.
Yeah.
They don't want, well, they want maybe
Well, a
maybe a
little bit,
little
but
like
not
a throwing a
dangerous.
drink in someone's face, right? But they really don't want, although I mean, there have been reality shows that have had like convicted murderers on them that somehow slipped under the radar.
Oh, okay. I did
Um,
not know that.
yeah, but that being said, right, they're trying to weed out the really violent people, right? They don't want a lawsuit. But at the same time, it's not just like benevolence that causes them to have these psychological evaluations. They're also like poking for weaknesses, right? That they can
Right.
then exploit for the viewer's entertainment.
Mhm. Right. I think like something I was watching, they said like, the producers like they want you to project your own stuff or want you to over identify with them. So, like projecting your trauma or like your insecurities or, self-esteem and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I don't know if you
yeah.
ever seen the show Unreal. It's like it was a scripted show that was about the process of making a reality show, like The Bachelor.
Okay.
And that show deals with that sort of thing, right? It was about these producers who are making these reality shows, and they get this psychological data about the contestants. And so they're, oh, this person, she lost a child, so we're gonna put her in a challenge with a dead child, right?
Oh
Or
my
right,
gosh.
right,
That's
where they're
that's
like
cruel.
probing. Yeah, right. Well, yeah. I mean, they're like probing for these weaknesses.
Mhm.
I'm
Wow.
kind of horrified by that.
Yeah. Well,
And
I
Yeah.
mean, this isn't a real,
Yeah.
this is a scripted show about, right? So did not happen in actuality, right? But the scripted show is written by someone who had formerly been a producer. I think it was on The Bachelor. So was familiar with that world. So maybe it was hyped up for the scripted show, right? But I'm sure that
Mhm.
they do that. And I have heard that they do that where they look at the psychological profiles and then say, oh, this is going to
Wow.
trigger this person or this is not.
so when I think about reality TV, and you mentioned the Kardashians, um, I once asked somebody, what have the Kardashians done that made them famous? And they're kind of like famous for being famous. They got this show, they did some, maybe perhaps did some outrageous things, said some outrageous things, they became famous. They then able to leverage that into creating their own brands, which was extraordinarily intelligent, into promoting brands for others, et cetera. They made a lot of money. Are people looking at these types of reality TV things, and looking at themselves and saying, "Hey, this is a different way for me to do something different. I'm going to go ahead and be on Instagram, or I'm going to be on whatever else. I'm going to try and do some of these outrageous things that other people have done so that they can emulate some of the reality TV stars," or are we not seeing any evidence of that type of behavior?
I mean, some people are doing that for sure. I think it's interesting when people critique the Kardashians for being famous, because I mean, there's always been people who are famous for being famous. Royalty are famous for being part of a family, just as the Kardashians are. So that's true. But I do think they did usher in this kind of new era of celebrity, the kind of so-called DIY celebrity, do-it-yourself celebrity, where it's not this routine kind of channel to celebrity, like they're getting cast for a movie or what have you, right? Um, and they have worked incredibly hard to create their brands, right? But there's certainly people who look at that and say, I want to follow that. In fact, a lot of people who go into it's actually a problem for casting for reality shows now, I've heard, because a lot of the people who go on to reality TV are wannabe influencers or influencers who have that in mind, that goal in mind, not to be part of a reality show, but to get the fans, the followers, the spawn con.
Mhm.
And so that's certainly, yeah, and the more entwined that reality TV gets with social media, the more that we see that. So if you look at like old school reality TV, like The Real World, I don't know if you've ever watched that, that aired in the 90s. It's like these
Yeah.
people, yeah, like some of them were entertainers and they wanted to get more press for their band or whatever. But for the most part, they were there to be part of a reality show, where it's really hard to find people now who are going on a reality show just to be part of a reality show. Like usually they have some kind of end goal in mind. So
Mhm.
for sure there are people, watching the Kardashians and saying like, oh, this is a valid route to fame. This is a valid route to money.
And I think you had mentioned like it's cheap to make the reality TV shows because you don't have to like pay these actors and things, and then these contestants or reality star wannabe stars are basically saying, well, this is a cheap way to get advertising and promoting self, and here I
Yeah,
am.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
symbiotic in some ways,
yeah,
right? They get
yeah.
cheaper free labor, and then the reality stars get more followers, which
Like
leads to more money.
cheap exposure and
Yeah,
um,
but I think for a lot of people, it doesn't come off as very real when it's people who are very clearly on the show to, just to get influence, to
right,
get followers. Yeah.
right. Yeah, and they get blamed for it, right? On shows like Bachelor, like, oh, they're not here for the
For
right
the
reason.
right
And
reasons,
yeah,
right? And it's like,
yeah,
well, how many people today are going on The Bachelor truly to find love?
right.
You said that some people, young guys, are looking at some of these shows, Bachelor or whatever, to learn dating shows, to learn how to date women. Um, and you said that could be problematic. In what way? In what ways do you find it problematic?
Oh, I mean, there was one study that showed that with college-aged men who were getting cues from these shows to learn how to date women. I mean, this is not real experience, right? This is a highly artificial experience. And I do think watching The Bachelor can teach us something about contemporary dating and courtship. That's like the whole premise of my book, but at the same time, that's not. Nobody's life is like The Bachelor. We're not shut up in this environment that's totally self-contained. If you look at each other like wearing evening gowns at 10 a.m., nobody ever eats when they go on dates. The gender roles are highly rigid, right? I mean, it's not a simulation of real world experience. And if it were, probably no one would watch it because it would probably be pretty boring.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm kind of like thinking back of like the first ones, the very, very first ones, it was tamer. It's kind of like they were trying to, or at least it appeared, right? It was like less dramatic. I feel like it just got more and more, and as you know, like the host always says, "Never before seen," or "This has
Never
never
before
happened
seen.
before," and I'm like, you say that after every season,
Yeah, well, I mean, even the first Bachelorette, Trista, I think is still married to Ryan
Yeah,
from the,
yeah,
right? So I
yeah,
mean, they actually made a match.
yeah. But it's like it is like less dramatic, and then it's just like you said, it is boring. So it's like this, catch 22. But yeah.
Danielle, have you ever watched, or even Erica, have you ever watched the bride shows, um, people about to get married, trying to figure out what they're going to do with the dress or their venue or whatever? There always seems to be an inordinate amount of drama associated with
Hmm.
those shows. Is
Yeah.
that Erica, you asked the question, does that normalize bad behavior? And I look at that show and I ask that question big time. I mean, if you're getting married is for many people is a highly stressful thing, for whatever reason. And does this make it even worse? Or does it give you positive clues like, oh, that's a really nice dress. Oh, that's a really nice idea. Is it
It
positive or
depends
negative?
on the show. It depends on the
Hmm.
show, right? I think it's interesting because a lot of these bride shows are very into consumption. They're very into spending money and this idea that it's not like a real wedding unless you spend large amounts of money and you buy a lot of stuff and a lot of things. But in some ways, that reflects our culture. I mean, our culture wasn't always like that, but American culture today really does equate, spending with having weddings. So I don't know if that's the show's fault. I think that's just reflect in some ways, right? It's this double-edged, like it's reflecting our culture, but I think it does change us in some ways as well. But I think of some of those shows like Bridezillas, I don't think people are looking at those shows and aspiring to be the Zillas,
Right. I think
right?
it's kind of like validating of like, shoot, like I know mine was really dramatic, but it
But I
wasn't
wasn't
that
like the
bad,
Zilla,
right? Like
right? And
maybe not
also those show,
me.
Bridezillas also like
Yeah.
play into all these stereotypes about women
Yeah.
being these insane creatures who are
Hmm.
beyond the boundaries of logic and get flip out over a dress being ripped or whatever. Um, I don't know if a lot of people are watching Bridezillas and aspiring to be the Bridezilla.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think maybe a show like Say Yes to the Dress. The
Hmm.
dresses on that show are extremely expensive. I would think out of reach of the average person. And I
Hmm.
wonder about someone tuning into that show and thinking like, "Oh, my dress should also be expensive like that." But I'm not
Right. And
aware
then
of
you
any
feel
research
bad.
on that.
Yeah, and then you feel bad about yourself. And that could be also said about like body image or
Hmm.
lifestyle, right? Like, things like the Kardashians or like other shows like highlighting like the elite, right? Of like, man, like, I mean, on some level, it's kind of like, oh, I'm curious, like, they're people too, right? They have drama just like we do, or they're not all like prim and proper or whatever, right? But at the same time, it's like, wow, wouldn't that be nice, to live like that, or say yes to the dress, and wow, I wish a show can just give me a dress like that. And so it's like, you might feel bad about yourself after, like, just like that comparative piece, or even body image, where I feel like some shows are getting more like inclusive, or they're not all like they all don't look like America's Top Model, right? But other shows like Love Island, like they're all like six packs, thin, tall, and it does, with the casting, it skews the viewers. So yes,
For
I'm not
sure. Even a
sure.
show
Yeah,
like, oh, sorry.
no, that's all.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, even a show like Love is Blind, right? They talk about how
Mhm.
love just like knows no boundaries, but it's like the boundaries of conventional hotness and the people that you've cast for this show, right?
Right, that is
Although,
true. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but as you point out, right, the shows in the 90s were pretty bad in terms of, body diversity, in terms of diversity, like at all, but in terms of body diversity, right? I think they've gotten, like not America's, Project Runway now has
Oh
like
yeah.
models of different sizes, right? So
Oh,
I
do
think they've
they?
become, yeah, I think they've become more, I don't know what the most recent season, but I know the seasons before it did. So I think they've become certainly more size inclusive. But yeah, the Kardashians are a tough case because it's really interesting to think about again why people tune in, and it's bifurcated, right? There's people who hate the Kardashians. They will hate everything that they do and with a fiery passion, which is interesting in and of itself, that level of hatred. why. But also there are people who really aspire to be them, right? And to be
Mhm.
like them and to have their bodies look like their bodies. And people might say, well, at least, their body type was different from what we had seen before, but it's still a very specific type of body type that now people are aspiring to have.
Mhm. Right, and then
You know,
that's their brand too, like, "Oh, now I can look like them and dress like them and have their stuff."
And you can buy all their products, right?
Right, right.
it's interesting, like them or not like them, they've just become enormously successful. You have to give each of them credit for getting into that situation, number one. But number two, once in that situation, stopping and saying, okay, now how am I going to leverage this? And they just have done an outstanding job. Each of them individually, have just done an outstanding job of that, like them or not. Just an outstanding job. I mean, it is truly remarkable. But one thing that you said in your book, you started to trace the early introduction of reality TV, which actually went farther back than
Mhm.
I would have pegged it. Okay, and it made me wonder: are we already seeing the end of reality TV? Are there other genres that are popping up? And so 10 years from now, it's just going to be looked at as like, yeah, those people were insane watching reality TV all the time. Now we're on to some other drama.
I don't think we're seeing the end of reality TV anytime soon. I think every time I try to count reality TV out, it kind of rises like a phoenix. And that's the great thing. Well, I don't know if you consider it great, right? But that's the interesting thing about the genre is that it really can reinvent itself in different configurations. So still so much of the television that we have is reality television. Again, because some of it is just that's monetary dynamics, right? A lot easier to just produce multiple episodes of these shows versus prestige scripted series where you're paying these actors these huge salaries, right? And like you actually have to pay union wages to the crew and
Mhm.
like build sets and all that stuff. Um, I think because of the monetary dynamics of it, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Now that said, I think we see these like little mini reality programs, right? The TikTokers, the YouTubers who are
Mhm.
really the influencers, right? Who are really rising up, and that's even cheaper to produce. All you need is, an iPhone and a person and you can have a TikTok video. And so I
Mhm.
look at like my daughter who's 11, doesn't know much reality TV, but she has a favorite YouTuber for sure, right? A favorite
Mhm.
TikToker and right, and the kids are just so plugged into these mini reality TV shows. So that seems like it's going to be more the wave of the future, the more kind of DIY
Mhm.
individual reality TV versus the shows. But I don't think the shows are going anywhere anytime soon. It's still a really, really dominant genre on American television.
Yeah, and like it just really escalate, because it's just like before, back then it was like maybe a portion, and then now it's like every single, there's so many, like all the shows on the TV are somehow that reality.
Yeah, I think it was one of
Yeah.
the estimates was almost half of the shows on TV are reality TV. Although that might take into account sports, which also like,
Oh, right.
I wouldn't say that's reality TV per
No,
se.
no.
Um, but yeah, it's a lot. It
Mm,
continues to be this cultural juggernaut. I mean, even if you look at the last season of Love Island, millions of people are tuning in. And this is a show that requires a lot of you because you have to tune in every day because it's going in real time. It's too much for me, honestly. Like, with my schedule,
right.
I can't, right? But so many people are having watch parties, right? People were really kind of rejuvenated by this show.
Mhm.
And that's in some ways kind of an old school format reality show. So I really don't see it go. And people will also say, well, it needs to get zanier and zanier, it needs to get crazier and crazier to keep the audiences. I think yes, but I mean, there have been zany reality shows in the past. If you look at the early 2000s, there were all sorts of wild reality shows.
Jersey Shore.
Well, yeah, or like, do you want to marry Harry? Who they were competing for? They thought it was Prince Harry they were competing to marry, but it was actually a doppelganger. Like, just insane. Bridal Plasty, The Swan, like just
Mm.
insane TV that was happening then. So I don't know if reality TV is getting zanier and zanier, or it has to. I just think I don't know if it's here to stay forever, but it's definitely here to stay for a very long time.
Mhm.
It's interesting you mentioned watch parties. So
Mhm.
I would argue parties are an excellent form of connection, right?
Mhm.
If I'm looking at um, contemporary figures, many people are decrying the fact that we don't have connection, that young men don't have connection with anybody else, themselves, women, anybody else, and that's a big problem. Young people in general don't have that connection. But yet when I hear about watch parties, if reality TV is bringing us together, that's a clear positive, right?
I mean, yeah, it does create, so I would say there are positive aspects of reality TV, right? Like it does create social connection. And sometimes that connection is founded upon that, rejection of the train wreck, right? I'm rejecting train wreck, so are you. Let's talk about that train wreck together. And it's happening in real time at watch parties, at bars, right, or people's houses, or around the water cooler at work. It's happening online a lot, right? In social
Mhm.
media spaces, on message boards, people are connecting with other people who are watching these shows. And there's that immense sense of social connection, right? There's a lot of research on how you mentioned, right, that we don't really have these spaces in American life that we used to have to the extent that we used to have that fostered these social connections, right? I mean, religion is still dominant in American life, but it's fewer people go to church than they did before, right? There's a lack of kind of so-called third spaces where people can go and be social with others. And so online is kind of one of those spaces. And these shows do foster these connections, positive or negative, between people, and also between people of different, demographic characteristics, right? So I've had lots of conversations with lots of people about reality TV, people of different genders, races, ages, right? If you want to talk about what's happening on Sister Wives, we're going to talk for the next hour because we both want to talk about that show, right? And so it does foster that connection that kind of transcends these social boundaries.
Mm.
And the other thing about, I just want to say also, right, the other thing about reality TV, I know we briefly mentioned politics, but is that it's kind of, even though it's definitely entwined with politics, these are kind of presented as apolitical spaces. So like, even though we're very divided politically in this country, you can go to Love Island and nobody there is talking about politics. And so you can use that as something to, bond with other people regardless of their politics. So it does kind of become this uniting force.
Yeah, and also just like an escape too, right? Like just for not just the contestants, but also just for, you've had a long day, or you're just like you don't feel like dealing with like, your own whatever you're going through, and just have some little like entertainment
Well,
and
yeah,
escape.
escapism too. So yeah, we
Yeah.
haven't mentioned that even, which is interesting
Yeah.
because that's the reason I tune in is
Hmm.
escapism, right? Because there's so much heavy that happens in our lives and in the world, right? Especially right now. And to be able to just tune in to, Real Housewives, and the biggest question there is Tamara inviting Gretchen to the barbecue? And just be reeled in by that. These really low, for the most part, really low stakes shows.
Yeah.
It can just be very calming.
Right. Or even just like those feel good shows even, right? Like the
Mhm.
Queer Eye for the Straight,
Yeah.
um, or like those like makeover shows, and things like that. Like, oh, that's so cute, or oh, like, so just like something, or like like you said, like houses and things like that. So yeah.
Is there something out of the book that we haven't talked about at this point in time that you wanted to make sure we brought up or got discussed? And if not, that's okay, because I've got a couple of real quick questions I need you to answer. But go ahead, let us know.
Yeah, shoot with the questions. Go for it.
Okay. All right. Um, First thing that pops into your head, what's your favorite reality TV show today and why?
I see, I'm torn because I always used to say RuPaul's Drag Race, though I haven't watched that in a few years. I really like The Traitors. So I'm gonna go with The Traitors, American version. The host, Alan, who's like famous actor Alan Cumming, and he's just amazing. And he makes it just really campy. In some ways, it's almost a parody or a spoof of a reality show. Just everyone's dialing the camp up, and it just works for that show. And it's yeah, I'm gonna say The Traitors.
What's your biggest concern about watching too much reality TV
Myself or or for like
for
our
us,
culture.
for our culture?
Hmm. I think reality TV can reinforce a lot of negative stereotypes, especially
Mm.
about people in marginalized groups. So it can really reinforce like racial stereotypes, gender stereotypes. stereotypes about non-heterosexual people. And I think that it has changed in some respects where it's become aware of that, but it still does. And so I would say that that's my biggest concern about reality TV.
So for the clueless among us, give me one example of that.
Of how it does that. So, I mean, historically, like the black women that they cast for reality TV shows tend to fall into this archetype of the angry black woman, which is really like reinforcing this stereotype about, black women being illogical and emotional and quick to anger. And again, I do think that now there's more of an awareness of that. If you look at shows from like the late 90s or early 2000s, it's really there and it's less there now, but it's
Mhm.
still there now. So the way in which, and reality TV traffics in stereotypes, that's its bread and butter, right? It's stereotypes about everyone, you could say, but especially if it's stereotypes about people who are already being marginalized, I find that really problematic.
I
Or
can
women
understand
too,
that.
right? Like we talked about bridezillas, right? Perpetuating this
Mhm.
idea that women are just, the man is the logical one, and the women are just going to go nuts over the hem of a dress.
Go the other way. What's the biggest positive that's come out of reality TV?
Yeah, so I think it's because reality TV takes us into these places that we might not otherwise see, that reality TV can be a tool for greater social understanding. Even going back to the early days of the real world, Pedro Zamora was this gay man who was living with AIDS. He kind of gave a social face, a human face to the AIDS epidemic. When he passed away, the president, Bill Clinton, even spoke about him, right? For a lot of people, that was kind of the first person living with AIDS that we got to know on our television screens. It wasn't a character, this was an actual person. And it was a whole human being with flaws and assets, right? And so it can really humanize people who we might not understand because we've never met someone like that before. So I think, right, because it's so pervasive and so many people watch, it's really potent. It can really shape our attitudes for the worse. And we've talked about some ways how, for sure. But I think it can also shape our attitudes in terms of just being more accepting.
I
Okay.
love
I
that.
have
Yeah.
one last real quick question for you. You talked earlier about hate watching and how there's a big component of that in reality TV. So I want to ask you, which reality TV show do you hate and wish had never been shown?
There's shows that I won't watch. I often talk about how there's like a people draw a line. Some people will say all reality TV is exploitative. I cannot tune in. And I respect that, even though I'm a huge consumer of reality TV. Um, I don't watch Cops. I think it's really exploitative. It really makes me uncomfortable as a show. So I would really draw the line there.
Hmm, hmm, Interesting. Interesting. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to summarize what's important out of the discussion today, or anything else that you may want to talk about, new books or old books or whatever else the case may be. Erika, I'm going to start with you, and Danielle, I'll give you the last word and then we'll close. Erika, would you like to summarize from what you've gotten from today's discussion?
Yeah, no, thank you, Danielle, for joining us. It was really interesting and getting all these like different perspectives and everything. So what was I gonna say? Yeah, so I think like, it's kind of like checking in with yourselves, right? Like reality TV can be very entertaining and, informative and, looking at different cultures. It's again just keeping it for what it is. It's entertainment and it's just an exaggeration of, our different cultures and stuff. So, if people get really emotionally triggered or invested or whatnot, like take a look at that, right? Is it really about the TV or the TV characters, or is it more about yourself?
Shall I go?
Danielle?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you summarized what she said. No, I think we've talked a lot about the positives and negatives of reality TV. I think it's really important to have a balanced view of it because people tend to feel really strongly about it in one way or the other. There's certainly negative repercussions. We can watch it. It can make us feel badly about ourselves. It can, replicate stereotypes about various groups of people for sure. It can impact us in ways that are deleterious to our well-being. But I think there's also positive aspects, or it holds the potential to create greater social understanding by introducing us to types of people, ways of life that we wouldn't otherwise see. And sometimes those can be exploitative representations, and it's important to notice that and point that out. But at the same time, reality TV has the power to bring us together, especially in this highly polarized time, to kind of form these connections that we don't have a lot of spaces in our, contemporary landscape for forming. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's just really important to have a nuanced view of the genre. It's not all good, it's not all bad, but it's really important to pay attention to it because it's this cultural juggernaut. So many people are watching. And when this many people are tuning into something, it's really going to impact the way that we live our lives, especially here in the United States.
Mhm. You're
You're on
muted.
mute. Still on mute.
You're still muted. Dan, you're still muted.
Sorry.
There we go.
Thank you very much for both of you. There we go. Thank you very much. I did want to say that before I close, that having binge watched a couple of episodes of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and some of the Survivor Naked and Afraid type things, Naked and Afraid in particular, it actually caused me to go to the internet to learn more about some of the things that they said, right? Digging, trying to get water that had been filtered by the creek itself by digging a hole and having the water come through soil and all sorts of stuff. Is that real? So I actually found that it actually was even more entertaining for me, or more shocking for me, but just going off and learning more as a result, which I just would have never expected, since I was just watching it voyeuristically. But that said, let me say that our sponsor today is Equilibria Psychological and Consultation Services, whose mission is to help individuals achieve their personal potential and long-term growth by compassionately and respectfully helping clients live in balance. Visit equilibriapcs.com, equilibriapcs.com. You can look for them on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Also look for me on Instagram, Daniel J. Gomez 24, and on LinkedIn. Now for the disclaimer. I am not a medical professional, and I am not providing medical advice, particularly about how to filter water. The opinion of our speakers is solely their own, and the podcast is copyrighted and cannot be reproduced without the express written consent of EPCS Management, LLC.